anti-racist, anti-fascist and Black Lives Matter activist based in Tottenham, North London. He was a member of the Anti-Nazi League and School Kids Against the Nazis in the late 1970s. Like many here tonight, he's been active in this summer and last battling against the far right, most recently in Hillingdon, West London, confronting UKIP fascist Nick Tilconey. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Louise, and thanks for having me, Eastbourne. I think the first thing to state is that on the 13th of September, I think the whole of Britain, all progressive people, all anti-racist people, the majority of people in this country were shocked to see that literally 100, 150,000, some people say, people marched behind Tommy Robinson in central London on what was the biggest racist demonstration ever seen in this country, and it was a demonstration that was led by fascists. We've heard a lot about legitimate concerns, but to be honest, I don't think we can beat about the bush. Anyone that marches behind Tommy Robinson, a known fascist, anyone who was on that demonstration and saw the spewing out of hate and Islamophobia from the stage had racist ideas in their head to some degree or other. And the idea that somehow if only progressive and good people let these people know about the need for more funds for our NHS, to let them know about the need for better paid jobs, for better housing, for rent controls, and all of a sudden, as soon as people hear this, they'll stop being racist and stop going on Tommy Robinson demonstrations. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. Of course, we do need all those things. We do need actually an answer to the real problems that ordinary people face. But actually, we have to say what it is, as Louise said. Say what it is, which is racism. And I think that the idea that Reform UK is addressing those legitimate concerns is also another big lie. So Reform UK is getting, what, 30% of the vote, thereabouts. It's been hovering around there, leading in the polls. And it does try to prey on people's fears. It does try to talk as if it's for the people. I think he even came out, he being Farage, with the idea of nationalising the utilities to suggest that, that he's really on our side. But actually, it's a fraud, and he is a fraud. I don't know if anyone still reads The Guardian, but it's useful to still read it, because they do have some good stories in it every now and again. They do have one running a campaign about the real Nigel Farage and what he was like in his school days. And in his school days, he was a racist, and he was an anti-Semite, and he was a supporter of Adolf Hitler, as to say, Nazi. And his excuse, and these stories have been going around for a number of years, and he's always said, oh, it's just one person at school that said this about me. But now The Guardian had to think 20 people from his school that said this about him. And everything he's done since his school days have confirmed the fact that he is a racist, that the UKIP campaign to get us out of the European Union was based on xenophobia. Again, trying to speak to people's concerns, but it's wrapped up in xenophobia. And of course, the same with Reform UK. They try to address the real issues, if you like, but they stick it all together with racism. Oh, it's the Muslims to blame. Oh, it's the black people that do all the stabbing. Oh, we've got to have more stop and search, and so on. They're the ones taking your jobs. That's why there's no decent housing, because there's too many migrants. That's what really pulls Reform UK's message together. And when you think about the 100,000 fascists and racists that were on the streets of London on the 13th of September, you've got to say that actually they're being helped. They didn't do it all by themselves. And we're thinking, of course, of the likes of Elon Musk. It's strange. I don't know what it is about people that set up car companies, but Henry Ford was a famous anti-Semite, and he had a newspaper, but thankfully no one read, and didn't have very good distribution, because it was this little newspaper in California or wherever it was. But unfortunately, Elon Musk has a huge social media platform of hundreds of millions of people that use it on monthly active users, as they say, and he can actually spew out hatred on that platform. But more than that, he gives money and funds for international far right in the world today. But it's not just Elon Musk, it's not just Donald Trump, It's also coming from places you wouldn't expect it to come from. So, the Labour Party. And I think we're all shocked when we saw Shabana Mahmood tell us that they're going to take the jewellery of migrants coming to this country in order to fund their living expenses. It sounds like something out of Nazi Germany. That's what they did to Jewish people. Said, well, if you can get out of Germany and get away from what was going to be a Holocaust, we're going to take all your money off you first, if you've got any. And so this is just, the thresholds are being moved. And every time it breaks through one threshold, we try another one. And stuff that's happening in other parts of the world, like Palestine. If you can do genocide in Palestine, maybe you can do genocide everywhere else. You can they're doing it a bit in Sudan at the moment. And all of these ideas are coming back, and all of these barriers are being broken down, and it's very, very worrying times. But yeah, the Labour Party and Starmer think that they can fight off Reform UK by being like Reform UK. And it doesn't work. And they're saying that Denmark is the great example. Social democracy in Denmark, the Labour-type party in Denmark, doing something similar, but that hasn't worked. All that's happened is that they've lost their left-wing vote, they've lost the votes of young people, of progressive people, and so on, and actually they've seen the vote for the far-right firm up, because all you're doing is giving credibility to those ideas. So it doesn't actually work, even just on electoral terms, let alone human rights terms or anti-racist terms, or the idea of principles about working people sticking together, whatever the colour of your skin, and so on, which should have been at the heart of Labour Party politics once upon a time. And I also think we have to talk about how what Robinson is doing and what Farage are doing is very worrying on the level of actually the fascist street movement and the electoral wing coming together. And we're seeing that more and more. Again, Farage is only a few days after that big demonstration on the 13th of September, I think about 5 days afterwards, he came out with, we're going to get rid of indefinite leave to remain. That could actually ensnare maybe 5 million people who thought they were in this country perfectly legally and have been here, making their lives here, all of a sudden now having to worry, am I going to be the one that's going to be picked up by the British ICE? Trump's people go around in masks, kidnapping people off the streets of America. They've seen that, they, being the Labour government, and think, oh, let's roll that out over here. It is truly shocking. And so we're seeing, Farage has kept his distance from Robinson up to a point, but we're now seeing he's testing the waters just to see how far they can push it. It's gone even further in the United States of America. Just briefly, I don't know people, well, hopefully people don't watch Tucker Carlson's YouTube talk show, which has something like 28 million people checking on that. It's the biggest talk show in the United States, and he had on it a man called Nick Fuentes, who is a neo-Nazi. I'm not just chucking around swear words. That's a scientific definition of his ideas. And who his heroes are, and what kind of policies he wants to introduce in the United States. So that's splitting the MAGA base. There's quite a few things splitting MAGA, actually, because Trump isn't doing anything about affordability. But one thing splitting them is Nazism and anti-Semitism. Because it's getting harder. There's one stat about the young staffers on Washington DC, the Republican staffers, the people go in and help the Congress people on Capitol Hill. Something like 40% of them are supporters of the Groypers. The Groypers are the followers of Fuentes, the Nazis. That is really very, very shocking. So we're seeing it coming together, and how one part of the far right plays off against another part of the far right, and that's definitely happening here in the UK. Also, so they're being helped by the Labour Party and by the media. And you bring all that together, and you start to understand how it is that they got so many thousands of people onto that demonstration. And if you look at what they've been doing, they've been very, very clever. Their main campaigns around the boats, around the hotels, around flags, and around protecting women and girls. And in all of those areas, they've been supported by the mainstream media and by the mainstream politicians who have parroted the same things. So taken now as common sense that we must stop the boats, we must stop the boats. This is now the common sense, and it's like, a tiny number of people compared to the number of people in this country, but are coming across on boats, and it's costing peanuts compared to the massive wealth that is in this country. But people don't see it like that because people don't see the massive wealth that does exist in this country. I'm a financial journalist and you see it every single day on Bloomberg for literally trillions of dollars that is being traded around the world at the flash of a switch. But people don't see that. They just see that they're living in not very good circumstances, and they think that, oh, well, if they're getting free money by coming across on a boat, risking their lives, but apparently they just want to come in to get £9 a week. Really? I don't think so. £9 a week is also £9 a day. But even so, it's a week. Yeah, it's peanuts. So it's a nonsense, but people don't hear the truth about what's really going on. I read again in the Guardian today, as a consequence of the Labour Party's planned policies, we've got to stop them, but that's what they're planning to do in terms of migration. Something like 50,000 nurses in this country are thinking about packing their bags and going, because if they introduce the new legislation on migrant workers, then it means that people, instead of having waiting 5 years in order to get settlement, actually it'd have to be at least 10 years. And then on top of that, they're planning to introduce a whole raft of measures, so that you have to have A-level standard English. So in other words, most people in Britain need to leave because they haven't got A-level standard English. And anyway, that's another story. But that's what they're saying. They're inventing lots and lots of rules to make it harder and harder and harder for people to come into the country, but also for making it easier and easier and easier to get people out of the country. And that could lead to the collapse of the National Health Service if these policies go through. And actually, more generally, it'll lead to the collapse of whole industries, the general anti-migrant rhetoric that we're seeing in this country. There would be no social care without migrants. There would be no construction without migrants. You look at the hospitality industry is already slightly collapsing in places like London. But if you got rid of all the migrant workers in hospitality, that would collapse. The NHS, as we said already, would collapse, and so on. Agriculture, another area where the farmers are crying out for migrant labour. You don't see these big stories in the Daily Mail, but they are, and they're not getting it. And actually, it's going to lead to more and more prices going through the roof, and a collapse, progressive collapse in that industry. But these are the things that the media doesn't like to talk about at all. Okay, and when we hear all of this chat at the top of society, and from Reform UK and from Tommy Robinson, it leads to murder on the streets, as we have just heard. That's the reality of it. I remember growing up in the 70s, and it was the same then. We had a problem with the skinheads, which was basically a far-right street movement, which was based on violence. Violence was an organising tactic. It wasn't just something that it did because they like beating people up. It was like, they were deliberately doing it to actually make, as the Nazis put it, make whole areas Jew-free, same for the National Front in Britain, make it black-free, or the P-word free. That's what they were doing, and they want to try and get back to that. They want to get to a situation where they can get away with doing that again. And so they've been attacking, for example, meetings of socialists on the South Coast. They've been attacking Palestinian solidarity meetings. They attacked a climate change meeting led by children up in Manchester last week. That is them showing their true colours, and it's in a way partly a response to the success up to a point of what everyone here has been doing and around the country has been doing. So I think it's important to say they haven't been able to replicate the success in their terms that they had on the 13th of September, about 100,000 people. They haven't been able to repeat that up and down the country as they would have liked to have done. And instead, they found that, you're absolutely right, I'm running over. Not yet, but I will be in a minute. But they haven't been able to repeat it around the country. So in the vast majority of cases, we've been outnumbering them. Not all cases, and Crowborough would be a worrying example of one place where we haven't outnumbered them. That's, 600, I think, or in the last, I think there have been 2 demonstrations now at our army camp. They're planning to I was going to say dump migrants, and 600 is way too many, obviously. But for the most part, we have actually been outnumbering the racist demonstrations around the country. unity demos, such as like in Leeds, where we had 3,000, in Newcastle, similar numbers, 600 in Brighton, was down in that one. Just a couple of days ago in Exeter, 1,000 or 1,200 people marching in Exeter on a unity demonstration against racism. So it's not just all counter demos, but actually demos where we're showing the unity and showing the strength of multicultural Britain, taking the initiative, and that's actually been really, really successful and helpful. And of course, people know about Tower Hamlets, where they've where we literally got like 10,000 people out into the streets, where people came out to defend their community. And I think we have to continue that, but it's not just a question of confronting them on the streets. We also have to think about Reform UK as an electoral organisation, and so we have to, one thing we learned from the 1970s is that mass propaganda works. In the 70s it was getting out lots and lots of leaflets. Now we've got to do the leaflets as well as the social media. But in places like Fynn, where Reform UK thought that they were going to just sweep in and win that by-election, actually I think it's something like 10,000 leaflets were put out by Stand Up to Racism saying don't vote Reform UK, Reform UK is a racist party, and that had an impact at the polls, and it held their vote back, and it meant that not the Greens, they're coming up, aren't they? But not the Greens, but Plaid Cymru won that election. And actually, by anti-racists coming together like that, it shows that actually when people hear the truth about Reform UK, you start to expose them, actually it can make a difference, it can make an impact. So that sort of work has to carry on also. And I've got to finish, so I've got to my second page, but I will finish. And it has been successful, and it has split their ranks. You always have this issue of like the softer racists, they're still racist, but they're softer, they wouldn't consider themselves Nazi, and they'd be shocked when you call them racist. Those sorts of people who are the majority of these movements. And then you have the fascist core, which is doing a lot of the organising in places like Epping, in places like Crowborough, and so on. So Nick Tenkoni was in Crowborough. So our job is to actually try to split those two sections of their movement by exposing people like Tenkoni, but he is a fascist, get the quotes out of what he's actually said. Apparently he wants to start lynching people in Parliament Square if he gets to power. That's one of his little side projects. But he is an artist, he goes around seeing highly. He sees himself as a little Führer. And that will actually shock some of these people who come onto the demonstrations who think they're coming to just talk about migrants and stopping the boats. And that's what we found in Hillingdon as well, just at the weekend. There's something similar going on there where Tenkoni turned up, and people prior to him turning up said, why have you invited a known Nazi to our demonstration? And actually started to split their movement. Okay, to finish then, what do we do next? Well, Stand Up to Racism are not the only people concerned about racism. They're not only, and we know there are thousands of people in Eastbourne concerned about racism who aren't in this room, and that can be replicated across the country. That's why we need to actually build for a huge demonstration. I think it's going to be March, 28th of March. I think it's going to be announced tomorrow, with other forces beyond Stand Up to Racism, because we know that there are other forces that want to fight back too, and we're equally as shocked as we were by what happened on the 13th of September. So the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, CND, Stop the War, the trade unions, Friends of the Earth, Friends of Al-Aqsa, and many other organisations, Amnesty International, I mentioned Friends of the Earth, and others, are coming together and have been coming together in these round tables that Stand Up to Racism has been organising in London to pull people together and say, look, let's go for a huge demonstration, not a demonstration where the TUC puts its logo on a leaflet but doesn't do anything to get anyone to the demo. Let's stop doing that and let's just do what we used to do, actually mobilise and strengthen our side. So that's what's coming up. For us, and there's been a lot of unity demonstrations around the country in the build-up to that. And I think just to finish with the bright spots in the world, because things are getting polarised, but in a polarised situation, people polarise to the right, but they also polarise to the left. And so in the capital of world financial capitalism, New York City, they've just elected a democratic socialist as the mayor of New York, Zoran Mamdani, and I think we should celebrate that, and we should actually use his watchwords as a guide to action when he said that to get to any one of us, you're going to have to get through all of us. That is the basic solidarity that can drive back the fascists and the racists, and I think we also, of course, have to go beyond that and start to provide real solutions. And when people start to talk about real solutions, we can get people to come to a different sort of pole of attraction to the left. I'm not in the Green Party, but it was great to see the Green Party, instead of waving union flags as the Labour Party did at their conference, Zach Clancy got up and said, say it loud, say it clear, refugees are welcome here, and they're going up in the polls because they've got some principles. I think that's a lesson for Mr. Starmer. I don't think he'll take it on board, but we here know that there's that objective reality out there. We are the many, they are the few. Let's get organised.